The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council headquarters sparkled under the light of three suns. Inside, chaos had replaced the usual calm and order. Hundreds of alien representatives rushed through the halls, their voices filled with fear and desperation. The emergency meeting chamber, designed to hold the council during times of crisis, was packed beyond capacity. Speaker Tom, the elderly representative from the peaceful Bryn species, stood at the center platform. His silver-colored skin had turned pale gray with stress, and his four hands trembled as he activated the holographic display. The images he showed made many in the chamber gasp or turn away. Entire cities empty of life, hospitals overflowing, and colony worlds going dark one by one. The plague spreads faster than our best medical teams can track it, Tom said, his voice shaking. 37 worlds have gone silent in the past month alone. Our most advanced medical technology has failed to stop it. The bacterial strain. He paused. Fighting for composure, it adapts to everything we try. The room erupted in frightened voices. Representatives from a dozen species began talking at once. Some demanded military quarantines. Others called for evacuating whole systems. A few simply wept, their various forms of tears falling to the polished floor. In the back of the chamber, Ray, a junior diplomat from the plant-like verdant species, watched the panic unfold. Unlike his older colleagues, Ray had spent time studying the histories of newly discovered civilizations. An idea formed in his mind. Crazy, perhaps even dangerous, but possibly their only hope. "Speaker Tom," Ray called out, his voice cutting through the noise. The chamber fell silent as he stepped forward, his leafy form trembling slightly. "There might be a solution we haven't considered." The speaker gestured for him to continue. Ray activated his own data pad, projecting images of a blue and green planet that few in the chamber recognized. 3 standard years ago, our deep space sensors detected a new species achieving faster than light travel. We dismissed them as primitives because their technology seemed crude by our standards. They come from what we classify as a death world, a planet that should be too hostile to produce intelligent life. Murmurs of confusion spread through the chamber. Speaker Tom leaned forward, his 4 eyes narrowing. "What are you suggesting, young one?" "These beings, they call themselves humans, evolved on a world with thousands of deadly bacteria and viruses. Their bodies are built to fight off diseases that would kill any of us instantly. Their medical science isn't primitive. It's specialized for surviving conditions we never had to face." The chamber erupted again, but this time with a different energy. Hope mixed with fear in the voices that filled the air. Speaker Tom raised all 4 hands for silence. "You suggest we ask these humans for help? They're barely out of their gravity well. Their ships are powered by nuclear fission, of all things. They still use projectile weapons." Ray stood straighter, his leaves rustling with conviction. "Yes, their technology might seem crude, but they survive daily exposure to bacteria that would wipe out our worlds. They've spent centuries fighting diseases while we relied on sanitized environments and automated medical pods. What we see as primitive might be exactly what we need." The council chamber fell into deep silence as the implications sank in. Speaker Tom stared at the image of Earth floating in the holographic display. The reports had classified it as a death world, high gravity, extreme temperature variations, aggressive microorganisms, and constant environmental hazards. Yet somehow it had produced a spacefaring species. After what seemed like an eternity, Speaker Tom straightened to his full height. "Send the call," he commanded. "Reach out to Earth. Tell them." He paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of countless species facing extinction. "Tell them the galaxy needs their help." Ray bowed and hurried from the chamber. As he rushed to the communications center, he wondered how these humans would respond. Would they even understand the scale of the crisis? Could beings from a death world become the saviors of the galaxy? Behind him, the council chamber buzzed with new energy. Fear still filled the air, but now it mixed with something else. Hope. Sometimes, Ray thought, Salvation comes from the most unexpected places, even from a world that the galaxy had dismissed as too primitive to matter. The United Nations Space Command Headquarters in Geneva buzzed with activity. Military officers, scientists, and government officials packed the main conference room. On the massive screen at the front, an alien distress message played for the third time. Admiral John Stone stood at the window, watching snow fall on the Alps. Behind him, heated discussions filled the room. Some officials argued this was a trap. Others saw it as humanity's big chance to prove themselves to the galaxy. The Admiral simply listened, his weathered face thoughtful. "Play the medical data again," he finally said, turning from the window. The screen filled with images of alien worlds being ravaged by disease. Dr. Anna White, Earth's leading expert on infectious diseases, stepped forward and pointed at several data graphs. "It's fascinating," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "This alien plague looks very similar to bacteria Earth dealt with centuries ago. Their advanced civilizations never developed the basic medical defenses we take for granted. They've never needed to." The room grew quiet as she continued. "Their worlds are too clean, too perfect. Their bodies never had to fight off diseases like ours did. What they're facing now." She paused, looking at her data pad. "We could have handled this in the 1950s. Admiral Stone nodded slowly. "So you're saying we could help?" "Help?" Dr. White laughed. "Admiral, we could solve their whole crisis. Our basic antibiotics would work wonders. And our immune systems, we're practically superheroes to them. Their deadly plague wouldn't even give us a cold." The Admiral turned to face the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we have our answer. Humanity has waited centuries to prove ourselves to the galaxy. They called us primitives because our ships aren't pretty. They laughed at our crude medical science. Well, now they need that primitive knowledge." He walked to the central display and brought up Earth's fleet status. "I propose Operation Lifeline. We'll convert our cargo ships into hospital ships. Load them with medical supplies, antibiotics, and volunteer medical teams. The military fleet will provide protection." "But Admiral," General Roberts interrupted, "converting our cargo fleet will hurt Earth's trade routes. And can we risk sending so many ships? Can we risk not sending them?" Stone countered. "This is bigger than trade routes. The galaxy is dying, and we can help. Besides," he smiled slightly, "think of the diplomatic benefits of saving their worlds." The room erupted in discussion again, but this time with purpose. Dr. White was already calling hospitals for volunteers. General Roberts began planning fleet movements. The UN representatives drafted emergency funding proposals. Within hours, the news spread across Earth. Humanity's response shocked even the optimists. Hospital ships needed crews. Medical students volunteered en masse. The fleet needed supplies. Companies donated entire warehouses of medicine. Military protection was required. Veteran spacers lined up to help. At the Geneva spaceport 3 days later, Admiral Stone watched the first ships lift off. The massive hospital ship Hope led the way, its hull freshly painted with red crosses. Behind it, a dozen more ships rose into the dawn sky, carrying Earth's best doctors, strongest medicines, and most advanced medical knowledge. Knowledge that the galaxy had dismissed as primitive. "Makes you proud, doesn't it?" Dr. White said, standing beside him. They watched another ship rise, its engines glowing bright against the morning sky. "It does," Stone agreed. "They called us a death world species, said we were too aggressive, too resilient, too primitive to join their galactic community." He smiled as more ships lifted off. "Funny how things work out. Our primitive ways might just save their entire civilization." Dr. White checked her medical tablet one last time. "Our ship leaves in an hour, Admiral. Ready to show the galaxy what Earth can do." Stone nodded, straightening his uniform. Above them, the fleet gathered in orbit, preparing for their first faster-than-light jump. Humanity's greatest journey was about to begin, not as conquerors or traders, but as healers. Time to prove that being primitive isn't always a bad thing, he said, walking toward their shuttle. Behind him, more ships rose into the sky, carrying Earth's gift to the stars. The strength that comes from evolving on a world that tried to kill you every day. The hospital ship Hope dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the alien world of Primus. The planet's 3 moons glowed softly in the purple sky. On the surface, massive cities stretched across continents, but many of their lights were dark. In the Hope's observation room, Dr. White watched alien medical teams approach their ship. The aliens wore sealed environmental suits that covered their entire bodies. Behind their sealed vessels, more ships waited at a safe distance, afraid to come too close to the infected world. "They think we're crazy," Admiral Stone said, standing beside her. "Look at their messages. They're warning us not to leave our ship without full protection." Dr. White smiled and adjusted her simple face mask, the only protection the human medical teams wore. "Should we tell them we're wearing these masks mainly to avoid giving them our germs, not the other way around?" The Hope's landing bay opened, and alien doctors backed away in horror as human medical teams walked out wearing nothing but scrubs, gloves, and basic masks. Through the observation window, Dr. White could see the aliens frantically waving warning signs and pointing at their environmental suits. "Time to show them how Earth does things," she said, heading for the exit. Admiral Stone watched her go, then turned to the communications officer. "Record everything. The galaxy needs to see this." Outside, the alien doctors froze in shock as Dr. White walked straight into the quarantine zone. Their translator devices buzzed with panicked warnings. "Stop. The air is contaminated. You'll die instantly." "The air is fine," Dr. White said calmly, pulling out her medical scanner. "Your plague bacteria are strong against your species, but to us," she shrugged, "we deal with worse things in Earth's hospitals every day." More human medical teams spread out from the Hope, carrying supplies and setting up treatment stations. The aliens watched in stunned silence as humans handled contaminated materials with casual ease. Some alien doctors backed away in terror, while others moved closer, curiosity overcoming their fear. In the main city hospital, Dr. White examined an infected patient, while alien doctors watched from behind thick glass. She drew blood samples, checked vital signs, and studied bacteria under a microscope, all while wearing minimal protection. "Fascinating," she muttered, looking at the bacterial strain. "On Earth, we developed antibiotics for something very similar about 200 years ago. We can modify that treatment to work here." An alien doctor, braver than the rest, stepped forward in his bulky suit. How are you not dead? Our best scientists say no living being can survive exposure to this strain." Dr. White looked up from her microscope. "Your scientists never studied Earth life. You see, our world is filled with bacteria and viruses. Our bodies fight off hundreds of infections every day. We don't just survive disease, we evolved with it. It made us stronger." She turned back to her work, mixing medicines that the aliens had dismissed as primitive centuries ago. Behind her, human nurses moved efficiently through quarantine wards, treating patients that alien doctors couldn't even approach. By sunset, the first treatments began showing results. Infected aliens who had been given Earth antibiotics started to recover. Word spread quickly through the city, then across the planet. The impossible was happening. The primitives from the Death World were actually healing the sick. In orbit, Admiral Stone received the first reports with satisfaction. The Hope's observation room was now packed with alien officials, watching in amazement as more human medical ships arrived and deployed their teams. "I don't understand," one alien diplomat said, his environmental suit gleaming under the ship's lights. "Your civilization is so young. Your technology is so basic. How can you do this?" Stone looked down at the planet, where more lights were coming back on in the darkened cities. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the hardest path creates the strongest survivors. Every disease we conquered, every infection we survived, They all prepared us for this moment. The alien diplomat stared at the scene below, where more humans in simple scrubs walked fearlessly through plague-ridden streets. Perhaps he realized it was time to reconsider what advanced really meant. Captain Bill West stood in the Hope's laboratory, frowning at the test results on his screen. Around him, human scientists worked at their stations, studying samples from different infected worlds. Something wasn't adding up, and his years of military intelligence training told him this was no natural plague. "Dr. White," he called out, "could you look at this pattern?" He pointed to a complex diagram showing the bacteria's structure. "I've seen something like this before in old Earth records about biological weapons." Dr. White moved to his station, her eyes narrowing as she studied the display. "That's impossible," she whispered. "These genetic markers, they're artificial. Someone engineered this bacteria." The lab grew quiet as other scientists gathered around. Admiral Stone walked in just as Dr. White was explaining her findings. "Look here," she pointed to specific parts of the bacteria's structure. "These patterns are too perfect, too organized. Natural evolution is messier than this." Captain West nodded grimly. "And look at how it spreads. It's not just attacking victims randomly. It's targeting specific biological systems, systems that most Alliance species share, but that humans don't have." Admiral Stone's face darkened. "You're saying someone created this plague? Deliberately?" "Yes," Dr. White confirmed. "And whoever did it knew exactly who they wanted to hurt. They designed it to spread through Alliance worlds while being harmless to species with different biological structures, like us." The Admiral activated the ship's secure communication system. "All ships, this is Stone. Begin deep scans of all surrounding space. Look for any signs of cloaked vessels or hidden bases. Someone's been watching these worlds die." Within hours, human ships detected unusual energy readings from the outer edges of the system. Captain West led a team to investigate, their ships running silent. What they found chilled them to the bone. Hidden behind the system's smallest moon, they discovered automated probe stations. The probes were collecting data about the plague's spread, transmitting it somewhere deep in unexplored space. "Admiral," West reported back, "we've found monitoring stations, military grade. Someone's been watching their weapon work, studying how it kills." In the Hope's command center, Admiral Stone and Dr. White gathered with other leaders to review the evidence. The doctor pulled up more test results on the main screen. "The bacteria shows signs of recent modification," she explained. "Every time the Alliance found a way to fight it, someone altered it to be stronger. That's why their medical technology kept failing." "But they didn't count on us," Stone said thoughtfully. "They didn't expect a species with such strong natural immunity. Our primitive immune systems are actually more advanced than anything their weapons can handle." A young scientist rushed into the room, holding a datapad. "Sir, we've decoded some of the probe transmissions. They're being sent to a region of space controlled by something called the Crimson Dominion." Recognition flashed across the faces of the alien representatives present. One of them, his environmental suit trembling, stepped forward. "The Dominion. They've always resented the Alliance's power. But biological warfare, this is beyond anything we imagined." Admiral Stone's voice was steel as he addressed the room. "So that's their game. Weaken the Alliance with a plague, then probably sweep in to help once everyone is desperate enough. Classic conquest strategy." He turned to Captain West. "Track those transmissions, find their source." "What do we do now?" Dr. White asked, looking at the evidence of genocide spread across her screens. The Admiral's reply was firm. "First, we keep healing people. The Dominion's weapon won't work anymore, not with our medicine countering it." Then, he looked at the tactical display showing human ships spreading through Alliance space. "Then we show them why picking a fight with a Deathworld species was their biggest mistake." In the lab below, human scientists continued their work, developing vaccines and treatments. But now there was a new energy in their movements, a controlled anger. Humanity had come to save lives, only to discover they were actually fighting a war. And if there was one thing humans understood better than surviving diseases, it was protecting the innocent from bullies. Red alert sirens blared through the human fleet. On the bridge of the destroyer Thunder, Captain West watched as enemy ships emerged from faster-than-light travel. The Crimson Dominion had finally shown themselves, their blood-red ships spreading across space like a swarm of angry insects. "All hands to battle stations," West ordered calmly. Around him, human crews moved with practiced efficiency. The alien observers on his bridge watched in confusion as the humans didn't even put on protective suits. "Captain," one alien said nervously, "their weapons release radiation. You need protection." West smiled grimly. "On Earth, we grew up with radiation. Our bodies can handle levels that would kill other species. Just another gift from our death world." The first shots fired across space. The Dominion ships moved in perfect formation, their energy weapons lighting up the darkness. But they weren't ready for human tactics. "All ships, execute Plan Earth." Admiral Stone's voice came through the comm. The human fleet split apart in what looked like chaos to their alien allies. But there was method in their madness. The Thunder accelerated straight toward the enemy line. Inside the ship, the crew handled forces that would knock other species unconscious. Humans had evolved under high gravity. What other species called crushing acceleration was just a normal day for Earth's children. Impossible. A Dominion commander's transmission cut through space. Their crews should be dead under those G-forces. The human ships dove through gaps in the enemy formation, their primitive nuclear engines pushing them harder than the Dominion's fancy gravity drives could match. The Thunder shook as enemy fire hit their hull. Shields failing. An alien observer screamed in panic. "We don't need shields," West replied calmly. "Earth ships are built solid. We learned long ago, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Better to build tough than rely on energy shields." The battle spread across the star system. Human ships took hits that would have destroyed other vessels, their thick armor and compartmentalized hulls keeping them fighting. The Dominion fleet found themselves facing an enemy that didn't fight by the normal rules of space combat. "They're moving into the radiation belt." The alien observer pointed at the tactical display. A nearby star was flooding the area with deadly radiation. "Perfect," West smiled. "Helm, take us in. All hands, radiation protocols are in effect." The Thunder and 3 other human ships dove into the radiation zone. The Dominion ships held back, unable to follow. Their crews would die instantly in such conditions. How are you alive?" The Dominion commander's voice shook with disbelief. "Those radiation levels are lethal." "Lethal to you," West replied, ordering another attack run. "To us, it's not much worse than a day of the beach. Earth's sun tried to kill us with radiation every day. We adapted." The battle turned quickly after that. Human ships struck from inside the radiation belt, their solid metal hulls shrugging off energy weapons, while their primitive projectile weapons tore through the Dominion's advanced shields. On the Hope, now safely away from the battle, Dr. White watched the tactical display while continuing her medical work. "Hard to believe they thought we were primitive," she said to Admiral Stone, who was coordinating the fleet's movements. "They made a common mistake," Stone replied, watching another Dominion ship retreat. "They thought fancy technology meant advancement. They forgot that true strength comes from overcoming challenges, not avoiding them." The battle ended as quickly as it began. The Dominion fleet retreated, their perfect formations broken, their advanced weapons proved useless against humans' primitive warfare. Captain West stood on his bridge, watching the enemy ships flee. The alien observer finally understood what he was seeing. These humans, these Deathworlders, weren't primitive at all. They were something far more dangerous, survivors who had turned their harsh evolution into strength. "Send word to the Dominion," West ordered. "Tell them Earth stands with the Alliance, and if they want to continue this fight." He looked at his tough, radiation-resistant crew. We'll show them what real warfare looks like." Dr. White stared at her microscope with tired but excited eyes. After weeks of work, the breakthrough had finally come. Around her, the Hope's laboratory buzzed with activity as human scientists confirmed her results. "Admiral," she called into her comm unit, "we've done it. The vaccine is ready." In orbit above the Alliance capital world, Admiral Stone received the news with relief. His fleet had just fought off another Dominion attack, and the timing couldn't be better. "How soon can we start production?" "That's the best part," Dr. White replied, holding up a simple, clear bottle. "We can make it using basic medical equipment. Every human hospital ship can produce it. The Dominion's weapon is about to become useless." The Admiral smiled. On his tactical display, he watched human warships patrol the system, while hospital ships spread healing across infected worlds. The Dominion had never expected their enemies to split their forces this way. Half fighting, half healing. "Captain West," he called to the Thunder. "Status report." West's voice came back tired but proud. "3 more Dominion attacks stopped, sir. They're getting desperate. They know their bioweapon is failing." He paused, then added, "They really hate that we can fight in radiation zones. Makes their fancy ambush spots useless." In the Hope's medical bay, Dr. White began organizing the vaccine production. Human medical teams worked alongside alien doctors, teaching them Earth's primitive but effective medical techniques. The aliens had finally stopped wearing their heavy protection suits around humans, realizing that Earth's bacteria were no threat to them. "It's amazing," an alien doctor said, watching humans handle dangerous samples with simple safety gear. "Your bodies are natural warriors against disease. Even your blood cells fight harder than ours. We had to evolve that way," Dr. White explained, showing him how to prepare the vaccine. "Earth's diseases would have killed us otherwise. Now those same traits let us help you." The vaccine spread quickly through Alliance space. Human ships fought off Dominion attacks while delivering medicine to infected worlds. The death toll finally began to drop. Cities that had gone dark lit up again as their people recovered. On the front lines, Captain West led another patrol through a radiation belt, hunting Dominion ships trying to stop the vaccine delivery. His crew worked calmly despite radiation levels that other species found terrifying. "Enemy ships detected," his sensor officer reported. "They're trying to ambush the medical convoy." West nodded. "Not today. All hands. Battle stations. Let's show them why you don't mess with Earth medicine deliveries." The Thunder's engines roared as they moved to protect the hospital ships. The Dominion vessels, caught between human warships and deadly radiation, had nowhere to run. Their advanced shields couldn't stop Earth's solid metal weapons. Back on the Hope, Dr. White watched the battle from her lab window while preparing more vaccines. "Hard to believe they thought this would work," she said to her alien assistant. "They created a weapon based on how their bodies work, never imagining someone like us existed." "Your Earth must be a terrifying place," the alien said, carefully copying her vaccine preparation technique. Dr. White smiled. "Terrifying but beautiful. Everything that tried to kill us made us stronger. Every disease we fought taught us more about healing. Even the radiation that fills our space helps us now." Reports flooded in from across Alliance space. The vaccine was working. The plague was stopping. The Dominion's perfect weapon had met its match in humanity's primitive medicine. Admiral Stone stood in his command center, watching dots of light represent recovered worlds. "Send word to all ships," he ordered. "Phase 1 is complete. The plague is contained." He looked at the tactical display where Dominion ships were retreating. "Now it's time to make sure this never happens again." On worlds across the Alliance, people looked up at their skies with new hope. The Deathworld species, once dismissed as primitive, had proved that sometimes the hardest path creates the strongest healers. And they weren't done yet. The great crystal dome of the Galactic Council sparkled once again, but this time with celebration lights. 3 months had passed since the plague's defeat. Inside the Grand Chamber, Representatives from every Alliance world gathered for a historic moment. Admiral Stone and Dr. White stood before the council, their simple Earth uniforms standing out among the elaborate alien dress. Behind them, Captain West and other human officers watched with pride. The same chamber that once dismissed Earth as primitive now fell silent as Speaker Tom rose to address them. Today, the speaker's voice carried through the hall. We rewrite our understanding of civilization. His silver skin glowed with health, the plague nothing but a memory. We once judged advancement by the comfort of our lives, by how far we could remove ourselves from nature's challenges. He gestured to the human delegation. Earth taught us differently. They showed us that true strength comes not from avoiding hardship, but from overcoming it. Their primitive world created the very things we needed most: bodies that fight disease, minds that understand healing, and spirits that never give up. The council chamber's screen showed scenes from the past months: human medical teams healing the sick, Earth ships protecting convoys, and the final battle where the Crimson Dominion retreated into deep space, their bioweapon strategy defeated. The Dominion made a fatal mistake, Dr. White explained to the council. They thought removing all traces of their weapon would hide their guilt. They didn't realize that Earth's primitive science would recognize an engineered virus instantly. We've been fighting biological weapons since before we reached space. Admiral Stone stepped forward. Earth's fleet remains ready to defend Alliance space. Our patrols have pushed the Dominion back to their borders. They've learned that radiation zones aren't good hiding places anymore. This brought chuckles from the alien representatives, who had watched human ships use deadly radiation fields like highways. But defense is not enough. Speaker Tom continued. Today, we offer Earth full membership in the Alliance. Not as junior partners, but as equals. More than equals. As teachers. Dr. White blinked in surprise. The speaker explained further. Earth has agreed to establish medical training centers throughout Alliance space. Their primitive biological science will be taught to our doctors. Their understanding of disease and immunity will strengthen all our worlds. Captain West smiled as he watched. On his tablet, reports showed Earth ships already patrolling Alliance trade routes, using their radiation resistance and tough ships to guard sectors other species couldn't enter. Humanity had found its place among the stars. There's more, the speaker announced. The Alliance is redesigning our classification system. We will no longer call harsh worlds Deathworlders or label their species primitive. Earth showed us that challenge breeds strength. From now on, such worlds will be called crucible worlds, places where the challenges of survival forge the strongest civilizations. Admiral Stone accepted the Alliance membership seal, a crystalline emblem that now showed Earth alongside the oldest Alliance worlds. As he held it up, cheers filled the chamber. Representatives from worlds that once feared Earth's primitive nature now celebrated their new protectors. Later, in a quiet moment aboard the Hope, Dr. White looked out at the glittering Alliance capital. Hard to believe it all started with them calling us primitive, she said to Admiral Stone. The Admiral watched Earth ships and Alliance vessels moving together through space, their crews now working as one. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor, he replied. They feared our world's harshness, never realizing it created exactly what they needed. A species tough enough to fight their battles and wise enough to heal their wounds. Below them, the next class of Alliance medical students boarded the Hope, ready to learn Earth's medical science. In the ship's labs, human doctors prepared to teach the lessons their harsh world had taught them. And in space around them, Earth's fleet stood ready, no longer seen as primitive, but recognized as exactly what they were: survivors, healers, and protectors of a galaxy that finally understood that true strength comes in many forms.